say about life? You gotta get together. Tell yourself a story that violate every law of the universe. Just to get through the goddamn day. Certain linguistic anthropologists think that religion is a language virus that rewrites pathways in the brain, dulls critical thinking.
Change. We have to change our mind about ourselves.
In what way?
A knowledge of self.
Search for the knowledge, use science and math.
Knowledge, wisdom, understanding is the key to wealth.
And be queens and kings like the centuries past.
Knowledge, wisdom, understanding is the key to wealth.
Search for the knowledge, use science and math.
Knowledge, wisdom, understanding is the key to wealth.
And be queens and kings like the centuries past.
Knowledge, wisdom, understanding is the key to wealth.
Our own mind has to be changed. We have to change our mind about ourselves.
In what way?
A knowledge of self. Our own mind has to be changed. We have to change our mind about ourselves.
In what way?
A knowledge of self.
Peace. Welcome to the Knowledge of Self Radio Show. My name is Teray.
Peace, the rule of law.
Peace, Jakil Knowledge of Law.
And we would like to welcome you to another broadcast of the Knowledge of Self Radio Show on April the 20th, Easter Sunday, and also in some circles, 420. We more or less are focusing on protecting and respecting the black woman on a law power rule, what we call the Wisdom at a Cipher Day. So as always, I like to begin with a quote that we selected for today's show. And this is by Brigham Young. And it says, "You educate a man, you educate a man. You educate a woman, you educate a generation." Why don't we go ahead and pass that around?
You know, for me, it's, it's the saying like, I think Elijah was the one who said it, but I'm sure it's been said, various times before him. But it just deals with the woman being the first teacher of the child. Some people would debate that, but at the same time, you got to remember that the woman has a child in her stomach, and all that she's going through emotionally, things that she's exposing herself to, and things of that nature are all being transferred to the child. So that's where that that classroom can be seen in its infancy. So I just see it as if you treat the woman the right way, show her her value as a man, or from a man's perspective, because that's the perspective I'm coming from. It's gonna pay off, because now she's gonna make sure not only to carry herself with dignity, but make sure she teaches her children that same thing.
Right, true indeed.
Mm-hmm.
True indeed. And then, just right now I was kind of thinking, generally, we're talking like in terms of war, right? The men are killed oftentimes, but the women are allowed to live. Mm-hmm. And if the women then have kids, she's going to share that knowledge and keep it going that way, right? So although you may kill the man and stop it from that point, a woman will always kind of hold that thing and give it to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And keep it going. You know what I mean?
That's deep.
Right. Yeah. I think today's show is definitely going to reflect the lack of education in what's considered a white male-dominated world and society in reference to violence against women. So I think that's very true. If you educate women specifically about acts of violence and more importantly how to prevent those things, as well as teaching young men and men about the same thing then you will progressively see some sort of change. You know, so it's a really great quote.
no doubt.
Who chose that quote?
I can't remember. But no, one thing it made me think of, because in reverse, you think about, say, the Willie Lynch letter. Some say it's fictitious, or some say it's not actual fact, whatever. But there's science in it, you know what I mean? So I think in the letter it talks about how it's very important to use shock and awe to basically teach the woman to fear the Caucasian man, and then in turn she will teach that to her children. So on the reverse, you can see how it's been used and still being used to this day. You know what I mean?
Right, true indeed.
Great point. Just to make sure our guests are up to par on this, this show is specifically devoted to how black women and women in general can protect themselves from violence and, like I said earlier, a white-dominated world. Why don't we roll into today's current events? I want to give it over to the brother Jarul.
Yeah, so this one comes from techdirt.com, and the headline says, LA Sheriff's Department on a new surveillance program. We knew the public wouldn't like it, so we kept it a secret.
Yeah, that's what my son would say when he was younger. He was like, yo, I knew you wouldn't let me have a cookie. So I just took it and didn't say anything.
Right. But now it's funny because now on the reverse end, if we keep something secret from the government, what happens?
Big problem.
You know? But yeah, so basically it talks about a system that's utilized here in California or Los Angeles area where they can surveillance, whole cities at a time, where they can record what goes on in the city, and if there was like a suspect for a certain crime or whatever the case may be, they can rewind the footage back to around the time that this crime supposedly went down and determine how it went down and the specifics of that to learn more about who the suspect may be. But the issue is that it's constant surveillance. You know what I mean? So there's constantly people watching you, on a daily basis without your actual consent and things of that nature. So it said that they use like these high-tech cameras. And then, we built on it on a previous show as it relates to the drones and how they're able to utilize the drones to basically surveil a whole city too. So, I mean, it's obviously if they have the technology, they're going to use it. You know what I mean? So we can't be so naive and shocked when these things come out. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And then, I remember hearing that article. One of the things that struck me interesting is that the sheriff was commenting on how at that altitude, I think it was like 10,000 feet or something like that, they actually weren't able to really distinguish what was what. So they couldn't tell if it was a Honda or SUV, basically, right? And if it was a poodle hanging out of a window, if it was a dude with a gun. But anything that kind of looked suspicious would then, like you said, you could rewind and then they were like, okay, well, we're going to go investigate it now based on this thing that we don't know what it is, but it just looks like something that we should look at.
Yeah, one of the cities they did it in was Compton. So, I just thought that was interesting.
Now, so I saw a picture of the drone plane, and I'm gonna say I saw that. I drive around in that area for work, and I'm always looking up at the sky and watching different things. In any event, I think I saw that flying over.
Looks like a nifty remote control airplane, doesn't it?
Right.
But it strikes your eye because you say to yourself, that's not a remote control airplane.
That's a little too,
a little too sophisticated. Right. I remember on one of the previous shows how a said police department had made a decision to remove cameras from their cars.
Oh, that's another.
So you can go ahead and add on because it's just what I know we definitely want to make sure our viewers are aware of is that, different agencies, they work together. They're not working autonomously. They all meet in a room and they talk about these different things that they're putting in place. So I wanted you to add on about that.
Oh yeah, well that's on another topic, but I know that LAPD also or snapping antennas in their cars that basically track what they do, so that they'll be off the radar when it comes to, doing the different things in the neighborhoods and stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's another one that I was reading about. But let me read some quotes from what some of these officials said. This one comes from an LASD officer. It says basically the system was kind of kept confidential from everybody in the public. And it's from Sergeant Akitani. A lot of people do have a problem with the eye in the sky, the big brother. So in order to mitigate any of those kinds of complaints, we basically kept it hush hush. And
simple.
Right. Another one. This one was kind of really interesting. This one was followed up by another statement from an LAPD official who noted that frogs generally come around to the idea of being boiled to death.
Wow.
And the statement is, people thought that this is the government trying to see what we're doing at night to spy on us, said Romero.
So that last comment about frogs come around eventually to be boiled, and I think we shared this before on another show, how one of these so-called Illuminatus people was saying, basically we work on people's ability to adapt. And so as long as people are always willing to adapt to something, then we'll always win, because we'll just do it so slowly that you're just, okay, whatever. Okay, whatever.
That's what is the following statement. That's what he basically said. He says, people thought that this is the government trying to see what we are doing at night, to spy on us, Romero said. And so over time, things shifted, and now if you try to take down street lights in Los Angeles or Boston or anywhere else, people will say no. So basically, he was making the statement earlier that initially when they first put up street lights, they felt that the people felt like this was the government trying to control and blah, 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 right? But people, none of us really beef about street lights nowadays.
Right,
We just think it's a, everyday thing.
Shoot, that's the alarm to get home, right?
Right. So he's basically saying that it's inevitable that, we'll be used to being spied on too, because we're already there anyway.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing a lot of people miss. Everyone's like, oh yeah, you're talking about something that's going to happen in the future, or, that's not happening right now. They may be planning to do it 10, 15 years down the way. No, we all have cell phones. You've all got Facebook. You know what I mean? Yeah, all those things are happening right now.
Wow. And they're all linked. Like, if we got to really be naive not to think that these aren't in place so that they can have an easier way to, know what we're doing, know what we're thinking.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, come on now.
Well, thank you for that one, brother. Why don't we go ahead to the next current event, Brother Jaquil?
Indeed. Peace. So I got one from dailynews.com, and this is dealing with Australia. They jumped on the whole let's get rid of bad stuff thing, and they're deciding to ban an energy drink that contained an erectile dysfunction drug. So the name of the drug is Moska, Moska. I'm sure it's probably a short for the components of what's, and the chemicals that actually make that up, most likely. In any event, it's known to give you. It's interesting. In one part of the article, it actually says that it'll give you an extremely long erection, that also is followed up by headaches, nausea, things like that. So I'm assuming, I guess after that kind of damage, maybe is where the whole dysfunction comes in. I'm not sure on that, but
probably overuse kind of thing.
Right, exactly. But I think the positive thing is, you shared earlier or shows before about Subway, and how that whole started, and the Gatorade. They actually banned a chemical in the Gatorade that made it bad. So everyone is kind of waking up, to the idea of kind of cleaning themselves up and getting good food. So I think that's a good positive thing that's happening in Australia.
The key is to stay awake though, because like I said on the last show, there's other things that they do daily that we're not necessarily paying attention to. So
exactly.
Don't just stop at one thing. Just keep doing what's best for you. Not only you but your children, their children, so on and so forth.
And in addition to that, please don't wait for people to inspire you to research. You know, we're sharing these things as they're released through the press. However, behind the scenes, we do research. So give yourself a little test. Just pick something that you use regularly. And we stated this on a health show last year. Put in some of the ingredients into on an online search that you see being, you know, used in the products you use, and see what those products actually are that are in, you know, your food items or whatever else you're using to bathe in, or
Right.
you know, any number of things.
Right, exactly. And to add on to that, within the article it states how in the ingredient it's actually marked as a natural ingredient. So
Frightening, man.
right now, for everyone in, I want to say California, was that United States wide, where they were going to pass the bill where you had
GMO.
the GMO bill. For all of you who didn't want to pass that bill, that's a result of that. Things like that being able to be labeled natural, or oftentimes not even put on the label, because they, like we've shared before in earlier shows, you know, they don't have to say that it is that, because they changed the definition of what water is, and so now water is also manure, and they can just throw that into your thing in small amounts, right? So,
Right. Right. He's talking about something that you could find on an FDA site, on the FDA site,
Right.
about the percentage of, you know, harmful things that can actually be allowed in processed foods. So check out the FDA website. My current event is actually a repost that was released on CNN about the states where rape is most common. And they have an interesting graphic where they have the United States, and they have percentages that are color coordinated, and tells you exactly, you know, which states have the highest percentages of rape. So, you know, we were talking about this before we came on the air, and out of all of the states in the union, Alaska has the highest percentage of rapes. You can check out the actual graphic. I would just say put in a search for states where rape is most common plus CNN, and you should see a map appear. And essentially it says that in America's last frontier state, nearly 80 incidences of rape are reported per 100,000 people, the data show. Nationally, the rate is 27 per 100,000. And then it goes in to say that rape is least frequent in New Jersey. The state with the second highest rate of reported rape behind Alaska is South Dakota, with a rate of 70 per 100,000.
Wow.
So, you know, they also give you a list of all the states and the percentages of rape that, of course, people need to keep in mind that were reported, and which will come out in this show, that many times rape is not reported, you know, molestation, and the list goes on and on, but generally those things are not reported to where people can, you know, add them into data or statistics.
Right. So oftentimes those numbers are a little bit lower. The number would be higher,
Right.
right, than what is actually being reported.
And surprising to us, California had one of the smallest percentages of rape. Of course, again, that could mean that in California, a lot of them are not being reported,
Right.
or there could be a little bit more awareness among women, and
Now-
just this culture in general in California.
And beyond what we were talking about, that could be a good part of it. You got to remember there was a lot of things that happened in California, like the Night Stalker, right? And I want to say there was some other one, and that was all in our generation, right? So there might, like you said, just might be overall a little bit more awareness of being in those kind of situations.
Right, because we have had a long list of serial killers, rapists that, you know, have preyed on women in our state. Definitely. You
Yeah,
know?
you know, for me, because I've lived on both coasts, I could definitely see that, you know, women here are a little bit more, they're less trusting. which I can definitely see why. But on the other end, I guess it depends on the case. You know what I mean? I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So why don't we go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get into the show. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself Radio Show. My name is Teray.
Peace, Jarulala.
Peace, Jaquil.
And today's show again is titled Protect and Respect the Black Woman. So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of not only advocating against violence perpetuated on women, but more importantly, how these things can be prevented, both by men and women, because it's important that people understand that even though we may be gearing a topic towards a particular gender, it's important that both genders be informed about how to prevent the said topic in this case, which is violence. So we're going to get into the definitions for today, and if my brothers don't mind, I'll kick it off. The first definition is rape, R-O-P-E, and it's classified here as rape is sex you don't agree to, including forcing a body part or an object into your vagina, rectum, bottom, or mouth in the United States. 1 in 6 women reported experiencing rape or attempted rape at some time in their lives. Letter B, the rule.
So, before we go there, it's because it specifies in the United States. Is it considered something else elsewhere, or?
Well, this is a definition that is on the United Nations. I mean, I'll have to get the acronym later, but it's the United Nations Anti-Violence Campaign, and this is one of the things that they define rape as. Of course, even though this is specific to a statistic shared in the United States, I would say that it is universal, and then also there could be some people who would add on to that. But I'll just add on, the thing that I was taught is that rape is an act of violence. More than anything.
Right, because it goes more beyond the sexual aspect.
Right.
Because you can look at they raped this town, right, and meaning like they destroyed everything, and they didn't necessarily run around having sex with the town.
Right.
Right, but they destroyed everything in the town, and so rape could definitely just be dealing with just violence.
Right.
Okay, so B is sexual assault. Sexual assault or abuse is any type of sexual activity that a person does not agree to, including rape or attempted rape, touching your body or making you touch someone else's, incest or sexual contact with a child, someone watching or photographing. Is that a word? Photographing. Pardon me. Photographing you in a sexual situation, someone exposing his or her body part to you.
And stalking. I think, this is a word that came up in our generation. especially like the brother had mentioned off air, the night stalker. I would like you to share a definition of what stalking is in terms of how you've heard it.
Oh man, I would just say, the person that you can't really get rid of, and they're just always around you. Whether they're directly sitting next to you or they're just watching you from afar. And nowadays that's been taken to a whole new level where you look at Facebook, right? Because people are like, yo, you Facebook stalking me. Like every post that I'm on, you on. Every group that I'm in, you in. Yeah, so I would say that would be the stalker.
And that's a really great point. I'm happy that you brought that up because social media has opened up a whole new door for predators. And I think that's one of the things that when you're out there using social media, keep in mind that your posts are being looked at quite possibly by any number of people who you don't want to be guests on your Facebook. They could be posing as other people. Sometimes other people can hijack someone else's Facebook information because some people are careless. But that's a really great definition. Why don't we all talk a little bit about harassment and sexual harassment specifically in the workplace, because we all are employed here, which is a really good thing. We like to keep that going. How does everybody define harassment? I want to give it over to Jeru, and we'll just kind of go from right to left.
I think it's a slippery slope. You know what I mean? So for me, I generally try to keep the conversation, especially with women, when it comes to work, just strictly professional. Because anything outside of that can lead to, a situation that isn't really good for either party. So, so small talk's cool, but other than that, that's where trouble comes. You know what I mean? Because really harassment could be just making a woman feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
And especially in this day and age, it's lock you up first and then ask questions later.
Right.
So, I've seen a dude lose his job because he was having a conversation with someone else at lunch in the cafeteria area, said a cuss word in conversation, talking to his friend. A lady walked by and felt some kind of way about it and reported it to HR.
Exactly.
And they told that dude who had wife, kids, you can't work here anymore.
So I mean, and that's another thing when we consider harassment, it's important that we also consider a woman's experience, and a lot of times it's best, just like what Jeru said, is that when you're in a working environment and you're professional, especially if you don't really have a clear history with a said individual, whether this be male or female, it's best to keep your conversation professional. So harassment, the term, as far as I understand it, is basically when you are doing anything in reference to communicating with a person, whether it be physically, and people have to understand what I mean by physical communication. So if Jeru were a female work companion of mine, and I really didn't know her that long, and we feel comfortable working with each other, if I say, hey, how you doing today? If she wanted to report me for doing that, she could actually report me for doing that, because that was considered an unwanted touch. I physically touched her. Notes to someone that may be suggestive, text messages, emails, unwanted phone calls, especially when the sister didn't give you her phone number. Do we have to tell y'all that? I mean, showing up to places, and this is more related to stalking, but showing up and frequenting places that a woman or a man, I mean, this is centered around, preventing violence against women, but, both parties can attest to these things. Harassment is like, there's a really long list of things, and I would say, since we talked about the professional world, read your employee handbook and get familiar with what harassment is defined as on the workplace, so that you can always protect yourself. If you're a woman who feels like someone is making unwanted advances to you, you'll be able to deal with it. You know, so harassment is a really long list of things, but anything that a person does that's unwanted, which you think may be considered sexually suggestive. You know.
Sure indeed.
So
I was laughing when you first said harassment. You ever read those little jokes where it's like the kid gave Johnny a word to say, and then he broke down the word and answered the question in a different way? Well, even I was thinking when you said harassment, it's like, all right, harassment to tell you hello, you took that as a sexual advancement, right? And now you're in the situation, right? Because that's not what she meant.
right.
Harassment.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I think men, we have this thing where you know a woman can say something to us, and we turn it into a sexually suggestive thing. You know what I mean? And that's one thing many women attest to. If I say hello to you, it doesn't mean anything other than hello. You know, I'm acknowledging your presence. But if a man is looking at a woman in a certain way and says hello, right, that could be deemed a form of harassment. You know, just because of body language.
And that's why Jewel is right and exact. You know, you just keep it professional.
Right.
Small talk, if any kind of talk. You know, I even tell this to my kids at school. I was like, yo, you don't go there to make friends. Right? So when you go to work, you don't go to work to make friends. At least that's not why I go to work. I go to work for a paycheck. Right? And so I do what's required to get that paycheck, because my life does not revolve around work. Someone else said something to me, and since today's the truth, I'm gonna just give it to y'all. He said, don't stick your dick in your money. So when you're at work, right? You just keep it in that fashion, and that'll really save you from a lot of BS on both sides.
Very good
and
point.
don't say that quote when you're at work.
Right. That's what's really important. So moving right along, you know, it gets murkier as we continue. We wanted to briefly talk a little bit about what's going on in several parts of the farming community in the state of California, if not across the United States. There's a really interesting documentary that we're encouraging you to watch. It's called Rape in the Fields. It's featured on Frontline. And in this series, you can learn a lot about this these concealed set of crimes going on against immigrant laborers, specifically women, where the cases that they reveal in this documentary are of women who have been raped, sexually harassed, and both. And it's largely been, you know, unnoticed up until just the last couple of years. And one of the things that kind of comes out in that study is the fact that women that come from different countries, and we're specifically talking about women that come from Mexico, El Salvador, Nicaragua, you know, countries, Guatemala, south of the United States. And in the narratives that were shared, there are several women that talk about how, you know, they or someone they knew was raped. And although that took place, they were either afraid to report it, simply because, you know, in many cases, women are afraid to report that they were raped.
Out of fear, right? Of backlash.
Out of fear, backlash. So now, I'm glad that you said that, because the backlash that they fear is the fact that they'll be deported. You know, so.
Which, according to the ICE report, that's not true at all.
Right.
Yeah, they're not doing that. So you should talk about it.
And what came out in that report is apparently through a said legislator, and I really don't like to say legislators' names, you know, but for the most part, this particular legislator that was featured on the program said that there are about 40 deportations a year. I mean, you know, please send us some information to refute that claim, because it sounds kind of weird. There are 40
Right.
deportations
And,
a year.
and the thing
United
about
States.
it, right?
That don't sound right.
The thing about it is the people who are deported are only people who are doing serious crimes. So,
Okay.
for instance, if you get, I don't know, you stole a Snicker bar,
Mhm.
and they're gonna pull up your stuff, and they're gonna be like, yeah, we see that your visa was done like 2 years ago.
Mhm.
That's cool. Just pay the fee for the whole little Snicker thing, and keep it moving, get back to what you were doing.
Mhm.
So that's why you get that low number of, of people who are actually getting deported.
Mhm. So I think if anyone, did anyone want to add on in terms of why do you think this is first of all, why do you think this is something that has been concealed as far as it taking place across the United States on different farms? You know what I mean? Because this is not an isolated incident. Matter of fact, what was revealed is quite a few cases have taken place on what we would consider the Pacific Northwest, like Washington, and also California. Why do you think these are cases that commonly have taken place in these areas among the farm workers?
Well, the people, the people that you're referring to are coming from very hard, hard places. So all they're trying to really do is make a living for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're in a tough circumstance like that, and then you have somebody who, is supposed to be kind of like a leader in a role that they're supposed to be like, I guess looking after you in a sense.
Mhm.
Like, I gave you this opportunity. It's almost like if I go against them, I have to go back to my old way of life, and I won't be able to really, really make a living for myself. So it's almost like I'll just deal with it and suck it up, kind of
Mhm.
thing. You know what I mean? As opposed to realizing that, your physical body is really all you have, and your dignity and things of that nature are what's most important, to any woman, man, child, whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's just deep. And I'm just thinking about all the possible scenarios. I mean, like you said, they're coming from places oftentimes where war torn, things like that.
Mhm.
And just that whole journey, even to get over here, right, is all crazy within itself. And who knows what kind of nonsense that you could run in. Maybe you might have already been accosted on your trip over here.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? And now you got to look at the psychological effects of what that does to a person,
Mhm.
right? And then once you come over here, you got to think, okay, not only if it's already happened to you, then you're kind of looking at your own people some kind of way, and then now you're looking at this other dude some kind of way, right? If it hasn't happened, you still have to take into effect the whole, you're coming from a place where you didn't have anything, like you're saying, God, if I don't do this, or if I say something about this, then I've got to go back to that.
Mhm.
Right.
And although that was messed up, and this is messed up, it's a whole lot better than what that is.
And also in addition to that, you have there are several women in the program that were concerned about the welfare of their family. Me coming forward to say that my supervisor in this field did this to me, then that puts my life here in America in
Right.
danger.
Mhm.
And what happens if I wind up in a situation where this the law gets involved, and they realize, oh, she's undocumented. So you're gonna get deported, but more importantly, that you're not gonna get the justice that you deserve in this situation.
Right.
As a matter of fact, one of the things that came out in at least one of the women that they interviewed, and it was quite a bit of conversation that went on in this piece, where the concern as far as women who may have wanted to step forward, because there were several cases where one man actually had perpetrated the same crime on several women on the same I'm gonna call it a plantation.
Yeah.
Okay, we all want you to make a parallel. And it turned out that in some cases when things were reported, not only would the authorities come in, appear, but they would bring someone from immigration with them. So then that just totally prevented the women, from following through with things.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Exactly. And that's why I said that. I brought up the whole ICE thing with people not being deported. I was like, yo, you should really speak up, because I'm sure that's used as a tool, right? It's like, okay, do you want these people to show up and to take you back to that place? You better shut up. Well, like you said, the threat of your family, oftentimes it's like one person coming over, two people coming over, trying to hold it down for the whole family back there. So they're sitting in their little measly paycheck here, back there, where it's kind of worth something. Although in Mexico, at least, your dollar doesn't buy you the same that it used to, like last year even. Right, but so they're sending that money back to try to make some extra money to make a better life for their people back home. And so to say something and to mess all that up would mean that those people aren't going to eat anymore. And at that point, it's kind of like, all right, well, I take one for the team, and I don't say anything.
So I think we should just briefly talk a little bit about some of the crimes, because again, we could go into a really long discussion if we focused on countries, in general that have the highest percentages of violence perpetrated against women. One of the places that I think should come to mind is Mexico. I wanted to refer you to an article. Again, it's on CNN. It was posted in 2012, and it's titled that Nobel Laureates Highlight Violence Against Women in Mexico and Central America. And one of the things that kind of comes out in this discussion is what's called femicide. And femicide is basically, the act of violence on women, but more importantly, the murder and torture of women. So one of the things that the article brought out is that in the city of Juarez in Mexico, it says that since 1993, there have been nearly 400 unsolved murders. And it says that victims as young as 6 have been raped and tortured, murdered, and abandoned, and hundreds have vanished. And then it goes on to say that poverty, isolation, and work shifts that end in wee hours of the morning make these young women easy targets of violence, while authorities have turned a blind eye. So I think one of the things that comes out in any discussion about the women of Juarez is just the value that is being placed on women in certain parts of the world, or just in the world in general. So what is, just in everyone else's research, what do you think is one of the reasons why authorities tend to overlook these things in countries such as Mexico? Because if 400 girls were reported missing in the United States, which they quite possibly could have, there would be some serious stuff going on. What do you think it is that's taking place in countries such as Mexico, things like that?
Something about the payoff, huh?
Payoff.
Who payoff?
No, it's interesting because when you started building on that, it made me think of this show. It came on. I can't remember the name of it, but basically dealt with. It takes place in like El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico.
Oh, that's the joint you were telling me that the dude died on the county line or something?
Exactly. But basically the show is really about trying to raise awareness of what's going on with these women and these unsolved deaths and things of that nature. Because what it was is like the show starts out with a body being dragged right on the line between El Paso, Texas, and Juarez. So it's like you have the authorities in Juarez and the authorities in El Paso trying to discern between who's going to take the case. And the egos between the two basically saying that I'm going to do it, no, I'm going to do it, no, I'm, going back and forth. So basically what happens is a detective from Juarez and a detective from El Paso work together. And one of the things that was interesting about the show is they showed some statistics on, say, the amount of murders in El Paso, Texas a year versus the amount in Juarez, and that the difference is outstanding. Like, it's huge. So you have an imaginary line that separates these two areas that are 5 minutes apart from each other, but very different, ways of life on both lines. So I think a lot of it, to me, has to do with, just the, like you said, women having hard times, so they have to work late hours, and they're more vulnerable because now they're, they may have to support a family and make money, but they can't do it just working 9 to 5, so they may have to work way more hours than that. They get out late, they're by themselves, and then you have people preying on them, and then it's a very profitable industry as far as selling women for prostitution. There's big money in that, as well as even children. There's big money in that. So when it comes to money and capitalism, there's always going to be situations where things are heinous because money's not real. So if you're dealing with something that's not real and you're putting so much value into it, anything can happen. You know what I mean?
The bridge?
Yeah, the bridge. The bridge. That's what it's called. Yeah.
So I wanted you to add on, Jaquil. What do you think authorities are failing to do in countries such as Mexico in terms of preventing just this rash of violence, against women in areas such as Mexico and other parts of what's been classified as Latin America?
There's a lot going on in Mexico or Latin America, right? But specifically in Mexico right now that would allow for certain things like that to happen. Anyone who's ever been to TJ and has seen someone get arrested or has almost been arrested by the police and had any kind of money. I go to TJ a lot. I don't want to get myself in trouble, right? But had any kind of money taken out of your pocket and then just released, right? Or was already in jail and was like, oh hey, I can get someone outside to produce this amount of money, and you've bounced out, right? Knows what kind of corruption goes on, and so if that's happening on that level, then of course there's bigger things happening on bigger levels. So really, I would think that's a place to where if you're going to report it to the authorities, you really need to try and go as high up as possible, and maybe talk to multiple people in the same office, because there may be a little corruption going on, which makes it hard for things like that to happen. In which little minions who are like, okay, yeah, cool, I'll just take this little payoff money and I just won't say anything about it.
Yeah, that's one thing that the show covered. It was that like the underground or the mafia or whatever you want to call it are so powerful in Mexico that the authorities are scared of them. You know what I mean? So there's one scene that this detective goes to the mafia boss's house, and just the way that things look, they kind of paint the picture. You see how serious it is. Like, they have more military equipment than the local law enforcement. They have more, manpower and things of that nature. So it's like you're up against an army. You know what I mean? And they have more force than you do. So you don't really have the resources to be successful, because they're all well aware of the murders, but it's like, what can we really do?
Right. And they don't play by the same rules, right? So you go to lock that dude up, he kills your family.
Right.
Maybe I'll let him go.
Right.
I think it's a matter of what people aren't willing to do. You know what I mean? I mean, because there are a lot of organizations that have come out of this campaign to protect women, specifically in countries classified as third world countries. So a really good example would be if you read some statistics from the Pan American Health Organization. I'll just give you some statistics that we researched. that 1 out of 3 women is abused in the course of her life. Among women ages 15 to 44, gender-based violence causes more deaths and injuries than cancer, malaria, traffic accidents, and war. And then we get into some statistics specifically where they state these numbers going on in different countries. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, a woman is abused every 15 seconds. In Chile, 50.3% of women from the age of 15 to 49 have been subjected to violence by their partners. And then it just kind of goes on and on. But one of the things, since it had been mentioned and brought up about what my brother said about the military and things of that nature, one of the things that my research brought out was that in areas where civil wars took place and people were displaced, a lot of things happened. So you have a lot of people that got their hands on certain types of artillery. They have control of certain areas, but more importantly, these are still weapons in the hands of men. And again, this is something that's perpetuated by men on women. So one of the things that the report revealed from the Pan American Health Organization said that activists say, it says that of the 25 countries in the world that are high or very high in the United Nations ranking for femicides, which is defined as killings of women that seem to be related to their sex, more than half are in the Americas, with El Salvador the worst in the world. And it says that El Salvador, which passed a law in 2011, in its first 16 months, only 16 of 63 reported cases were followed up. And then it goes on to say in the first 3 months of this year, 1,822 rapes were reported in the Brazilian state of Rio de Janeiro. Only 70 men were arrested. So just like when you're looking at those numbers, it would go back to what he said about corruption. When you have men controlling government, politics, the military, law enforcement, and they're not educated as what the harm is in allowing this type of violence to continue, whether it be in a man's house, on the streets, in the club, or wherever it is, then you're going to have these types of numbers. And again, let's go back to our original point. These numbers are just of women who reported them. Just imagine if they could be double or triple what you're seeing.
Right. Like I said, at the end of the day, man, it's big business. So when there's a lot of money in something, people are gonna they're not gonna part with their money. You know what I mean? So it's a tough situation. But at the end of the day, we got to recognize that without women, original women, then the world's not gonna change. You know what I mean?
No doubt. So. Shoot, without that, the world's gonna end. Cause how you gonna reproduce yourself?
Exactly.
Right. Man, I would say, there's power in the people, and the more people who stand up, the more powerful it will be. I was just hearing about a case where some lady was fighting over some land, and she didn't even have, you have the whole BLM thing going on right now. This lady fought over some land, and it was just her standing up, and she backed them all down. The BLM thing, a bunch of people came to their aid, and then they backed these dudes down. These dudes came out with guns and stuff. So, not to say that every time that you go to, speak the truth, that it's not going to be some kind of counter aggression to that, right? But you should expect that to happen. But but regardless of that, you should still always speak that truth, right? And fight for that. And as you fight for that, other people will help you fight for that. And then it goes back to the old saying, if the truth don't stop them, then nothing will.
Okay. Yeah. So I think why don't we go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about self-defense and self-awareness for women and girls, give you some things to be aware of when we return. Peace.
Peace.
Up.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray.
Peace, rule Allah.
Peace, Chuck Hill, knowledge of law.
And we would like to welcome you back to our Protect and Respect the Black Woman. The last segment, we talked a little bit about some of the things that have been taking place, not only in third world countries, but more importantly, just in the world at large. And, we must say as a disclaimer, it's extremely difficult to just lump all of this information into one show without, leaving certain things out. So for those of you who are viewing this, keep in mind that there's so much more research behind this, but we just can't share it. Otherwise, we'll be here for the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not really sure. One of the things before we touch on our second segment in terms of self-defense and prevention of crime against women and girls is the rash of violence against women in other third world countries. I wanted to specifically highlight what has been broadcasted several times in countries such as India, Pakistan, and Africa. According to this statistic, and you can check it out on www.unwomen.org, they give a statistic about female genital mutilation and cutting. It says that approximately 140 million girls and women in the world have suffered female genital mutilation and cutting. Of course, Oprah Winfrey and several other notable journalists have brought out this issue to the general public, which was, it was largely unheard of outside of their respective countries that they have been taking place in. One of the argument about genital mutilation in some societies in parts of Africa said that it has been a practice for, hundreds of thousands of years. And, now since the industrialized world has taken notice of that practice, why is it a problem now? So I kind of want to pass that around because, there are some people who aren't convinced that it is a major problem, even though the United Nations gave us this statistic. In terms of being on the outside of cultures that still practice that with their young women and or girls, how does everyone see that? Is it something that people should say, hey, that's their culture, leave it alone? Or is it something that, people should maybe think about getting involved and stopping? How does everyone see that?
For me, man, I've never experienced it, so I can't speak on the severity of it, the cultural practice or how it goes down or anything like that. But I can say that, why isn't certain birth controls deemed as abuse on women?
Right.
Because they have detrimental effects on the woman's anatomy, from bleeding to all types of other issues with their, reproductive organs. So I would say that, it can't just be one thing. I think there's a lot of things that can be detrimental to women, and
That's a good point.
Anything that's against the growth of the nation should be looked at. You know what I mean?
True, dude.
So.
Yeah, I do get the argument that it's like, okay, that's their culture and you should let people do what they do. That being said, you're supposed to uplift all of the human families. And so if someone's not doing something that's right and exact and you are doing it right and exact or a lot better than what they're doing, it is at least your job to say something. To the point to where you physically go over there and make someone do what you want them to do, whether you're doing it because they need to do the right thing or not, that's still like a form of tyranny, right? And dictatorship. Even when you have kids, right? As much as you want them to just do everything that you say and how you want them to do it, they still need to be able to express them and do their own thing. So I think, ultimately you need to maybe educate and share with those people some certain things, and maybe they'll see it another way. And then, if not, you need to provide a way for those people who are trying to seek a change from that to get that change.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you can't just be the person, and this is just basic customer care service, right? You can't just say, yeah, we don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And then just turn around and walk away from the person. You'd be like, no, okay, yeah, we don't have that, but we do have this. Or you could probably find it at this place. Or let me go find someone who can probably find it for you, right? So you need to, if you're going to be the one to point out the problem, you also need to provide a solution, right? And
right. I think that's one of the things that came out in our research is the fact that, there are several organizations around the world that have been formed, spearheaded by the World Health Organization, the United Nations, to name a few, which they're advocating that there be more education in reference to preventing these types of things from going on with and against women. One of the things in terms of when we're talking about female genital mutilation, all of the studies have shown that girls at a very early age are forced to do that, and the tools that are used to do it are really crude tools. They're not clean, and sometimes they don't use surgical tools. They use other objects to remove the clitoris. So the whole point of the matter is that anything that a woman is forced to do against her will, regardless of what age she's in, because generally I think it's anywhere from 9 to 13 years old where they begin doing that, if I'm not mistaken. When women or girls are forced into doing that, right, then it's considered a crime against humanity. You know what I mean? Whereas, like you mentioned, other forms of birth control, those are choices that women make. But, let's just say if we forced our males, if males in the United States were forced to be circumcised, you know what I mean? You were required to do it. It's kind of similar to that. You know what I mean? So one of the things
I see what you're saying though, but at the same time, when you sell something and like we just ran in that in Australia where they're banning that energy drink, right? If you sell something and you know what the repercussions of it is, then you are held responsible. On the streets, when that dude sells you some crack and it's not right and exact, that dope head runs back to that dude. It's like, yo, man, you did me wrong, right? He holds that dude responsible, right? That's on that level, and that's on a higher level. So I would say that, like the guy said, anyone who's doing any kind of crime, whether it's, you're cutting them off forcibly, raping them that way, or if you're doing it by giving them injections and telling them it's going to do one thing, but it really does a whole bunch of other things to them. Both of those people are equally as guilty.
Yeah, not to mention a lot of times with women in these countries, they're the only way that they're given certain benefits is if they do these things.
Right.
So if you don't get this shot for birth control, then you don't get this, that, and the third.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's basically presented as, let's make them an offer they can't refuse. You know what I mean? And then they go through with it and then end up in an even worse predicament. You know what I mean? Because now they're dealing with, bleeding and the medication I'm thinking of is called Depo-Provera, and basically.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
Right, but that's led to the spread of HIV because what it does is cause vaginal bleeding, and if a woman is on birth control, she's going to be more apt to not use protection, like condoms as commonly. So now you're passing blood, you know what I mean. So it's actually dealt in Africa specifically in an increase in HIV in certain areas. So, it's just one of those things where it should be across the board. Let's not just narrow it down to, the low levels, because it's these infrastructures that are in place that allow these things to happen. You know what I mean? And then we have to look at who puts these infrastructures in place.
Right.
You know what I mean? So let's look at everything on a large scale, not just on the small. You know.
Mm-hmm. So what would everyone's suggestion be in terms of approaching these types of things that are going on in the world? Because I did want to take us to one of the things that came out, and is real common in areas such as India and Pakistan, for example, and also in El Salvador. They're seeing these cases where men are throwing acid in women's faces, you know, and those random acts of violence are being repeated over and over and over again and growing in those societies. So, I mean, what is our responsibility in terms of, you know, civilized men in combating those types of things? Of course, we're sitting here, you know, but and men are viewing this as well. What are some of the things that we could suggest people do in terms of like visibly counteracting or fighting against these types of things?
First and foremost, turn the TV off. Don't let your children watch it, because everywhere you turn as it relates to television, it's dealing with violence against women, women being murdered. You know, cases where there's a detective trying to solve the murder of a woman, or women being raped on television. So it's seen all over the place. So if you're a child and you're coming up watching television, there's no way that you're not going to see it.
Right.
So that's that's going to have an effect on your psyche. And then, you know, if you see, say, your father or your grandfather or, you know, people in your community abusing women, you're going to just start to think that that's
normal. It's supposed to happen.
Right. So
exactly.
I think those are things that we need to nip in the bud, as far as, you know, not letting the television raise our children, for one, but being better role models for our children as men. You know what I mean? Treating our women right, so that they can see how a woman's supposed to be treated.
Right. Right. Yeah, no doubt. No, I want to add on what we said as far as the TV thing. I was just watching. My girl recently got into this whole CSI kick, and then I was noticing how they shown there's like 3 women on that show, and every time they show the women like doing something, it's always what I call like stripper music. You know what I mean? Like she's there's one I'm just thinking of right now, the blonde one, I forgot her name. She's trying to analyze the trajectory of a sniper round, and she's shooting it through something, and it's got her walking. And I got the little stripper music in the background, and so I'm telling everyone, I was like, "Yo, did y'all notice like the music and how sexy they tried to make her look?" And the general response, just off the top, was, "Well, yeah, you know, of course she's supposed to be sexy and powerful." I was like, "Yeah, but look at that image that they're showing women. Is that you have to? Why can't you just be a good analyst? You know what I'm saying? What's all the sexy part about, right? And then when you think, okay, women are getting raped and things like that, right? Well, okay, if you're perpetuating sexiness, right, young age, because you know, like the guy said, it happens to little kids and it's happening to grown women. So you know, if you're a younger kid, especially, you're perpetuating this sexy kind of attitude. You're acting that way. Dudes take it that way, and you're heightening the chances of being accosted.
No, but see that's a common misconception that men have. You know, we're gonna get into clothing, but
not necessarily clothing, just in action.
I mean, but that's a misconception that men have. That and women who actually, you know, are teaching these types of workshops, and they're working with people who were raped. One of the things is the first thing they have to counsel these women on is that, you know, don't begin to think that you are the reason why this act was committed on you. You know what I mean? Because when a woman gets dressed and she walks out of the house, right? That's not necessarily advertising, hey, I want someone to touch me inappropriately. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where
I know you're getting that.
Yeah, we got to get into it, because it's just like if you see if Because you have a daughter.
I have two.
Right. That's right, you have to. I keep forgetting that, brother. I don't know why. You got 3 children. It's just because it's.
I gotta pay for them. I haven't forgotten.
You know what I'm saying? Fire himself. If your daughter goes to the public swimming pool and she's wearing a bathing suit, right? And a man who hasn't been taught correctly, or a boy who hasn't been taught correctly, they're going to assume, well, she's wearing a bathing suit. Well, that means she's trying to be sexy. They don't associate it with the reality that, no, she's at a swimming pool and she's here to swim. That's why she has a bathing suit. You see what I'm saying?
But
Go ahead.
when a woman wears, say, a bathing suit
Mm-hmm.
to the mall,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it's, you know what I mean, when things kind of get a little bit like foggy. Like for me, it's like everybody's responsible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Men, first and foremost, yes, we got to stop. You know, we got to be men.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, women have responsibility in it too.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's all about how you project yourself. Not saying that it's your fault that you get raped and things of that nature, but I'm just saying, like, if you projected yourself a certain way, then the perspective of men would change too, because we wouldn't approach you in that same
No,
way.
I disagree.
I'm gonna say why the God is right,
Go ahead.
now no rule is absolute, right? But I'm gonna say the majority of the time the God is absolutely right, and here's why. My mom was almost robbed, carjacked at a gas station.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why she was not carjacked was one reason and one reason only. She's aware of the surroundings around her, right? So she wasn't putting herself in a place to where she wasn't paying attention to where the dude could just roll up on her. So what happened, long story short, she's looking around, she sees a dude, makes eye contact with the person like, yeah, I see you, you see me, and speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Dude nods, acknowledges her, walks past her, and carjacks the person right in front of her. Not even across, right. You know how the pumps are, 2
Right.
cars. Person right in front of her, because that person was not paying attention, didn't see anything, right? So can you say that that person had no cause in them getting robbed? You can't say that, because then why did that person not rob my mom? Because she was paying attention. Now, there are cases when someone's just going to rob you, they're just going to rob you, right? And that's just what it is. But at the same time, people who are doing these kind of crimes are weak and wicked people in the first place. So they're not trying to get someone who's paying attention or who's projecting themselves to be the. When I see a girl who walked out of CrossFit and she's feeling strong about herself, that's not the girl you're trying to accost. You're trying to accost a girl who's kind of, a little shrugged away, not so proud and walking, right? That's the target, because that's the easier victim.
Right. Well, I mean, at the same time,
Not that it's all her. Well, I'm
Yeah.
saying you do have a part in it, because if you was paying attention or doing your part or whatever, then
right. But there's a huge movement going on in India, countries like India, Pakistan, other places where these areas are considered, largely Muslim countries. But yet you have an extremely high percentage of violence against women. Now, in a Muslim country, it's well known that there's a particular type of dress that is required of women in those societies. Yet there are some really high percentages of rape of women in Muslim countries. You see what I'm saying? So, how do we address that? Rape in
some of
terms.
that is cultural though, in how they view
What, rape?
Yeah.
Right, exactly, and you're answering my question. That regardless of how a woman dresses, okay, let's just throw that out the window. Regardless of how she dresses, right? Statistics are still showing that women, right, more than any other, there's only 2 genders of people on the planet. Women are raped, 10 times more than men. You know what I mean? And this is all around the world. It's culture to culture to culture to culture. And we just shared earlier in the show that Southern California, or California in general, the sunniest state in the union, has the lower percentage of reported rapes out of all the states in the United States.
We got the most life, dog.
So how does that work? See, because like I would just say that many people would attest to the fact that yes, everyone has to be conscious of how they carry themselves, of course, but how a woman decides to carry herself, I mean, in terms of how she's dressed, you know, that doesn't necessarily state that she's a target for those types of things, or she's trying to make herself open to these unwanted advances. You know what I mean? We have to flip it in terms of this is a white male dominated society, and this is something that has been taught for hundreds of years.
I definitely don't agree that isn't part of it, right? And that's why I said some of it is cultural, because we live in a society, for the most part, to where women play a sub part to men, right? And then that's the danger in which those kind of things start happening, right? When you start saying, oh, okay, well, she's not at the same level, she's beneath me. If it's anything beneath you, then you're just kind of like,
an object,
yeah, I do whatever I want to do with it, right? And so I think that lies part of the problem. And that's why I said part of that is cultural, where when you start to look at someone or something and don't place any real value in it or high value in it, then yeah, you treat it however you want to treat it.
Right. So it's just the main message is, it goes back to what you said earlier. It's just education. You know what I mean? As far as men are concerned, if you do see women that dress in a way where you think that makes them a candidate for unwanted advances and things to be said to them, you know, that's something that has to be taken out of our mentality.
Now, but at the same time, and so I've always had this thing, I know we've talked about it before, and I don't really think you're going to get a true answer from women, and I'm going to just say that you can email me, jackhill187@gmail.com. You're not going to tell me the truth, but I know the truth, and I had it confirmed by a few women. I won't say the names because I think there's like a secret women's society. Yeah, I don't want to get them kicked out or anything. But you don't dress, right? No woman's going to put on a pair of jeans that doesn't make her look flattering. You see what I'm saying? No one's gonna put on a shirt or a dress or not do her hair or not do her makeup in a way that doesn't make her look better.
I mean, most women state that they don't dress for anyone else; they dress for themselves.
But let's just look at nature, right?
Sure.
Let's look at it. Look at nature. You think about nature. It's all about trying to make yourself look as grand as you can, so that the opposite sex will be attracted to you at the end of the day.
I don't think so.
What?
I don't dress.
Look at nature, G.
No, I don't dress to go to work because I'm trying to attract women. I dress because that's how I want to look for that particular day, and I think it goes the same for anyone, regardless of how it looks to us looking on the outside.
So when you were single, you didn't dress a certain way to have. Nah. You didn't put on a pair of clothes and like, yo, I look really fly in this.
No. I have different.
You didn't enjoy it.
No, I mean, I'm being honest with you. Like, if I wear a tie.
So you think most people?
Yeah.
85% of the people think the same way you do?
Of course, nobody thinks the same way. No.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, when we are looking at people that we're just speaking of, when we're looking at women, right? We have to be very careful in saying that, okay, well, she's gonna attract a certain type of person or attention that she doesn't want because she's dressed that way.
But that's the fact, though.
The fact is that's how men have been taught to perceive that.
But at the end of the day, it's going to happen. So that being said,
what's gonna happen?
If I'm wearing a police outfit and I'm in the middle of a riot, people are going to come to me for help.
It's gonna happen.
I have a police outfit on. So if a woman is dressed a certain way, she's going to attract a certain type of attention.
Off the bat.
So her knowing that, she should know that this is how people are.
Right.
So I should present myself in a fashion that's not conducive to the attention that I want.
But again, it still doesn't speak to the countries where women in a culture are not, they're not allowed to dress the way women do in Western industrialized countries. See, what I'm saying is that I'm referring to male perception.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
Okay?
it always starts with one.
I mean, but we have to flip it, and we have to say, okay, when is it that males are going to perceive that when they see that doesn't necessarily mean that this particular woman is trying to do anything in reference to a man? Why can't we just say that's how she wanted to look today, period?
That's not the world that we live in right now.
Yeah, this is not reality. That's not the equality.
So it's not reality.
That nowhere in the world, well, let me not say nowhere in the world, you'd be hard pressed to find very many places to where, let's say in so-called civilized worlds, right? To where when a woman walks out the house half naked, that no one's gonna not look at her in a sexual way. That's just the reality of what happens. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what's gonna happen. Right? And so now that you know that, like I was saying, because you know that's gonna happen, why don't you not dress in that manner? For instance, we all live in LA. If you lived in a Crip neighborhood, would you always wear red in that neighborhood?
I know Crips that do wear red
in
their neighborhoods.
Because they're OG Crips.
No, they're not OGs. Times have changed.
We're talking about in a normal gang environment. Are you going to be wearing red? Because that's not in every neighborhood.
I've known people that have.
I'm
telling you.
He's asking you.
No, this is rooted in
you.
You're talking about me.
Would you walk through the neighborhood in a certain outfit that you knew were going to draw a certain amount of attention based on what you were wearing?
As a teenager, no.
No,
okay.
But that has nothing to do.
But that's the point, though. Is that and then look now look, within those areas, are there kids who do not get accosted just because they're in that neighborhood? Yes, that does happen. But your likelihood of getting accosted is heightened when you're walking around dressed in that attire.
Yeah, only in that particular area.
Of course, but then when you go to like another area that wears red or purple or whatever they're wearing over there, then you need to fit in with that area, and that's what the God is trying to say.
Well,
to limit the amount of responses that you're gonna get because of where you live and the reality of the world.
Yeah.
You should probably dress according to that standard.
No, but what I'm saying is that's something that has been argued. Like, let me give you an example.
Okay.
In the 1970s, right? That was when the courts actually recognized rape as an act of violence and put it on the books as such. Other than that, it was just one of those things where, quite literally, it was a slap on the wrist. Okay, now it's considered a felony, right?
There were stonings back in.
Right? I'm just saying. I'm talking about in the United States,
okay.
right? Up until the 1970s, right? Rape wasn't really considered or classified as an act of violence. So now, that right there is a really good example of the male perception. All right. Now you gave an example where you wouldn't wear a color in this neighborhood, in this neighborhood, in this neighborhood. If I were in Maine, it wouldn't really matter because people in Maine perceive that differently than people here.
Right. Just like if I was in the Andaman Islands and I walked around naked, it'd be whatever.
Right.
So
but you're not in the Ottoman Islands, or you're not in Maine, or you're not in wherever it is. So you have to dress to where you're at.
Exactly.
Well, what I'm saying is that none of that is going to stop the high percentages of violence against women.
It's gonna lessen.
What will change? I mean, you could say that about any country where the percentages are like through the roof. It has little or hardly anything to do with how a woman is dressing. It has more or less to do with the perception of men of women. So at what point will we address what men need to do to where they perceive women differently, regardless of how they're dressed?
That's the bottom line. Yeah, it's about men first, but remember, television is programming. People tune into television all over the world, and they're getting the westernized perception of womanhood, sexuality, and those types of things. I don't care if you're wearing a garment that covers everything but your eyes. You're being programmed in a certain way. So that being said, that's going to be reflected in your way of life. You know what I mean? You can see it because you go to areas that they don't watch television, and they're walking around with nothing on, and it's no big deal.
Not an issue.
You know what I mean?
It's not an issue.
They have nothing on, and no one's bugging until outsiders come in and they're like, "Oh, it's wrong for you to be dressed like that." You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, yeah, it's about the perception, but we live in a society where the perception is more sexualized as far as nudity and exposure of skin and things of that nature. So if you know where you live, then you dress according to that. You know what I mean?
Great point. Great point.
But no, but to go to or to speak on as far as the male perception, you know, that really has to change within the power structure of the world, right?
And it comes back to the money thing again. There's too much money, and if you can control, because men, think about it, men are driven by that a lot of times, right? So if you can have a show or you can present something in a fashion that arises that in a male, you're gonna make money. So for them to change that, it's not really like a common sense, or it's not even like rational to think that they do it, because it's not going to benefit them financially. You know what I mean? So it's all about the dollar, man. So at the end of the day, we as parents have to first and foremost not let the TV raise our children, and we have to be teaching daily, to showing and proving that this is the reality of the matter. This is how you're supposed to conduct yourself. You know what I mean? And not even just our children that live in our household, but the kids in our community. You know, the people that we come across. This is what we should be doing. But at the end of the day, we're not doing it, and the television is. You know,
That's the issue.
the Facebook is. Everywhere you look, you see, you know, fights with males beating up women on Facebook. People sharing it, laughing at it.
Right.
You know, the girl gets punched, uppercut on the bus, and people are laughing at that. You know what I mean?
And no male comes to her aid.
Right.
Right.
So since we're talking about that, I know we were going to discuss ways that women and girls can protect themselves. So why don't we just kind of run it all down the line, lump it together.
Second Amendment.
Right. So how
45.
do we? What would be some of the suggestions that we could give to our viewers? You know, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, because again, you know, men and women need to know these things. You know what I mean? If you have a girlfriend, these are the types of things, like the brother was just saying, that need to be taught to your female counterpart, and vice versa. So as far as preventing date rape, stalking, and sexual harassment, so let's begin with the whole idea of date rape. How does everyone see what date rape is, and some of the ways by which you've been exposed to knowing the difference between casual sex and a date rape? Because I think that's one of the big things for the courts now. It's like when they get these cases, if one party has a really good attorney, they can kind of blur the lines and say, well, no, this was consensual sex. This wasn't date rape. So how does everyone define date rape?
You know, for me, date rape is, you know, when somebody you know takes advantage of you in a certain environment. You know what I mean? So whether it's drugging you up, getting you drunk, to do whatever they feel they want to do to you. But I think the prevention comes with women not being so trustworthy of people, really taking the time to study them and being aware when you're in certain environments. You know, if a man is going above and beyond and try to buy you a drink, and that's cool, let him buy you a drink, but be right there when he buys it. You know, don't let him bring the drink to you.
It's a great point.
You know what I mean?
What is that date rape drug?
I'm not sure, but there's a dude who just got in trouble, an ex-NFL player, Darren Sharper, who did the same thing.
Oh, really?
Him and one of his friends did to a couple women. But you know, basically it was like, let me buy you a drink. They go get the drink, come back, and the drugs are already in the drink when they give it to the woman. So, okay, you want to let a man buy your drink? That's cool, but like I said, be there. Make sure the exchange comes from the bartender to
right.
your hand, not
Right.
to the man's hand, then to you. You know what I mean? So I think that's one. easy
Right,
one.
and if I could add on, he's talking about the exchange between you and the bartender in a public club. You also have to be mindful of situations where you're at someone's house. It may be a large house, and the bartender is actually the host or the friend of the host, and because men run games,
Yeah.
ladies. They run some serious, and these are like serious games. How do you see date rape? And one thing I want to say about my brothers, including me, like, did you know we don't even know what the name of the date rape drug is? So just keep in mind we practice what we advocate. We're not advocating our male viewers to even explore these types of options. You know what I mean? Rape is rape, but what's
Right.
date rape?
Right. I would agree. Whether it's you putting some kind of drug in her drink, or trying to liquor her up, or get her really high, or you know what I mean. If you exclude, and that was always my thing, is if you exclude the choice, then it's really not worth it. Like, you know what I'm saying? If I was gonna hook up with a girl, it was because like we chose it. You know what I mean? Not
Exactly.
because like I got her drunk and she was feeling some kind of way, or I pressured her into it and she felt like she had to do it. It was like, nah, because
That's
what did
man.
Nas say? I got no game, just some women understand my story.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, no, but that's comes with manhood, and you could tell that you definitely have dignity about yourself. Like for me, it's always been my rule, because I have friends who would say, man, I'm gonna take this girl out and I'm gonna hopefully get her drunk, and you know what I mean.
Right.
They would do that,
Right.
but for me, it was like, man, if a girl's drunk, I'm not, that's not my thing, man. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, and that it's really good that you say that, because for the most part, let's just say we were in a court of law. If you're a man and you were accused of rape, one of the things that would come into question is, number one, were you sober? Number two, was she sober? Okay, did you drink? Did she smoke? Did you give her the drink? Did you give her this to smoke? Did you give her this to take? And that line of questioning kind of gets into that realm to where it's like, it appears that you forced yourself on this woman, and not only that is that you were giving her things that
To
led to
set
her
the
being
stage,
intoxicated. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But then there's always a flip side to that, because if a woman is actively a drug user, actively drinks, and then other people are brought to the forefront that says, oh yeah, she's always, she's never sober when I see her, then it becomes murky water. So I would say this, and I can speak for everyone on the panel. Ladies, when you go out with someone, remain sober. Keep your mind clear, because again, what husband and wife do, and what really intimate partners do who've been together for a long time and they know they have a really healthy relationship, what they do is different. But when you first go out with somebody, even a glass or two of, like, one or two glasses of wine can alter your guard. It could lead to your guard being taken down.
Yeah, first date, man, should never be let's go to the bar, let's go out for a drink. Like, a lot of things could happen there. You know what I mean? Like, just get in an environment where you can talk to that person, look them in the eyes, and really see what they're about. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But then that goes back to what we were discussing before. It's okay. So why do you put yourself in that situation, right? You're like, okay, you barely met. Maybe it's the second day, and you're like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna go back to your rest or your house, and we're gonna have drinks and talk. Nah, that's not a great idea, because off the bat, the dude is already thinking he's gonna smash.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's like, yo, she came to my house.
Right.
Why would she come to my house if she didn't want me to hit it? That's what the dude. In the case you ladies didn't know that, sorry dudes, I gave you the secret. Right, but that's what's going on in the dude's mind. He's like, yo, I'm gonna hit it.
Right. So that as a woman, you should know. It's like if I'm playing, if I have a basketball game, right, I should know my opponent. I should know everything about him. I should know that they're comfortable doing this. When they're in this environment, this is what they do. So, not saying that the guy you're dealing with should be your opponent, but you should know everything about how the opposite sex thinks.
Right.
Don't use your perceptive on things and think that that's how it is across the board.
Right.
Think from their perspective. You know what I mean? And if you do that, more than likely you'll be all right. You know?
Great point. On to the next one, which is what's stalking, and how can our viewers identify whether or not men and women, because this applies to both genders, but more so for women, how can women identify a stalker? And then I'll share a little interview I conducted earlier today about it. So how does everyone see?
I thought you were giving up the secret with the Facebook thing.
Oh, what's that?
The like button on that's a like button sign right on Facebook.
Like button sign? Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, at least nowadays, that's one way you could tell, right? Or suddenly you get some dude, and you just became friends, and he's liked every picture in your profile, and you got like, damn, more than 5 pictures, right? Dude might be, kind of stalkerish. If all of a sudden he's, taking the time to follow you around cyberspace, and then, even meeting you in certain places, maybe because now you being a little naive, you're like, hey, I'm gonna go over here for lunch. And
Or
the
you
dude just shows up like, hey.
Yeah, and they have the thing now where like Facebook will tell you,
Checking
like,
in or
like
whatever.
the map or whatever. It'll tell you exactly where the person's at. Like,
Right.
how dumb could you really be? You know what I mean?
Now, I think stalking. Again, my brother said it earlier that social media has opened up a whole new universe in terms of allowing people to stalk people. I would say that the story that was shared with me today by a good friend of mine, she had an experience where she had actually known someone for, not necessarily a brief period of time, but a period of time to where, that trust kind of began to develop. And as far as relationships go, things came to a sudden halt. And in saying that, the stalking, commenced after the relationship was dissolved by her. So things such as, calling members of her family's houses, different hours of the night. I think prior to that, and in hindsight, she said, he would do things like, put a flower on my car, or leave me a note.
Right, she thought it was cute.
She thought it was sweet, because at the time she was in school.
Yeah.
And then now bringing you fast forward, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, now I realize that was not a really good way to show affection for a person, because then it was like, well, that meant that he had to follow me in order to do those things. Okay.
Find your car on a college campus.
Right.
Yo, man, I just had to go watch my son play basketball at CSUN. That's a big campus, G.
Right.
I had to transverse that campus, just multiple parking lots.
Right.
Within that campus. So, to think on a day in the middle of the week where there's, I don't know, hundreds, thousands maybe of kids on that campus, most of whom have a car, you find one car out of that parking lot,
right?
You're probably crazy.
Right, you've been having, you were really, and this activity, one of the things she made clear to me is that the activity that followed after the relationship was dissolved, these are things taking place outside of, where she frequented. You know what I mean? So, you're looking up, something was damaged on her car. And as she progressed, like, she continued to tell me the story. It was just like, some of the people that she counseled, some of the agencies that she talked to, they really were concerned to the point to where they were like, listen, you're going to have to seek a safe shelter. You know what I mean? It's just got that serious. So one of the things that she shared with me is that, you know, again, it goes back to awareness, what was mentioned by my brother earlier, that you really have to give it some time with a person. You really have to look at the early signs. You know, is a person popping up when you didn't invite them to where you're supposed to go? And I'm talking about women too. You know what I mean? If you're a male and you have a woman who every time you turn around, she's like, hi, and you're like, whoa, you know, you surprise
you're at
me.
your job and she's there.
Right. Those types of things kind of suggest that maybe the person has a serious obsession, you know, going on.
But I wanted to say something to the whole, you know, the dropping off of the flowers and all that stuff being cute. And like my brother said, TV is programming, right? So these women are looking, those are the cues that they see from men that shows that they're a good man, right? But, I work. I don't have time to, you know what I'm saying, necessarily be taken out of my day to show up at your house or your job to track you down to see where you're at so that I can go put a flower in your car and then, because I got to make money. Right? I got other stuff to do, so you got to think about those things. But then, you know, I think that's the interesting point as far as the programming. So she sees that and thinks right off the bat, oh, that's cute. I would have seen that and think, dude, the hell are you doing? You have time out of your day to go drive way out somewhere to go, don't you have a job? Or how come you don't have a job then? And this is what you're doing instead of trying to find a job is put a flower on her, you know what I mean?
Right.
But my mentality is different because I'm not looking at like, oh, that's a cute thing, you know?
Right, and you know, I think in cases like that, getting to know the person's family, getting to know their friends, do they have friends? Are they always by themselves?
Right.
You know, what do they do on a daily basis?
Let's go on a group date. Oh, you have no one to bring?
Right. Things of that nature will, because you know, what was it? I think it was a Dead Prez song that said you are who you keep company with, or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you get to know a person's friends, you're gonna get to know them a little bit more, because remember in the beginning, people put that shield up.
Right, exactly.
And present themselves in a certain way that's not necessarily right and exact. So I think that's one way to learn about a person a little bit quicker. You know?
And that was one of the things, like you all touched on. What she said was her advice, especially for women, was that, you know, when you first meet someone, you know, it's a better idea to go out with this person in groups or couples that you know. Get to know, you know, the people in that person's life. I mean, one of the things that she said was that, you know, she really didn't know, like he was shy away from going to, you know, gatherings that may have taken place with some of her close friends or family members. And that was one of the things she said that she found kind of strange. You know, it's just like, okay, well, if you can't come around my family or my friends, you know, what's going on with that?
Right, how are we going to be in a relationship?
Right. So the desire to sort of stay isolated from people that the woman knows, that's something common. You know, it's just like, because if no one ever meets me and ever sees my face, I can get away with a lot of things.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's really good knowledge here today. Go ahead,
And
brother.
not to mention, you know, your mom, your parents generally can detect some things in a person before you see it.
I don't like him.
Yeah,
You know
man.
what I mean?
I don't like her.
You know, you're kind of blinded maybe by the superficial,
Yes.
but your parents will be like,
Yes.
man, something ain't right about that person. You know what I mean?
So again, today being the Truth Day, I won't get anyone else in trouble. I'll just speak about my own personal life. Man, there's been plenty of females who I have attempted to bring by the house, or who hasn't even made it past the phone call. Like my mom pick up the phone and they'll say something like, they call me Stan, my middle name, right? So they'll be like, is Stan there? And then my mom be like, like, who is this girl with no manners who just called the house and didn't even, I don't like her. And come to find out, like, I'm like, Mom, you tripping. Just, you know, maybe she just didn't, whatever. And then come to find out, like, okay, yeah, she wasn't like a mom detective right off the bat. So yeah, that's a great idea, I'm gonna say. And especially for dudes, if you have any female friends, bring the girl that you're interested in around your female friends, because they'll be able to detect that right off the bat too.
Wow, that's great. One of the things is, can anyone give our viewers, if you're in a situation where you may have a stalker, beginning specifically with women, what would you say some of their options are? Because I know there's very few options.
Make
in
it
dealing with
public. I would say make it public. Tell as many people as possible.
Great tactic.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because that dude is generally trying to be isolated and secluded.
Picture on
Yeah,
Facebook.
exactly.
Stalker. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take a picture of him taking a picture of you. Like, look, this
Right.
dude's outside my window taking a picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
Those
a
kind of
good
things.
idea.
So make it public.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure that you're not by yourself a lot. You always have people with you. Let the people that you're close to know what type of car he drives, or,
Right.
some of the things that he does as far as that give you the indication that he is stalking you, so that, everybody's aware of the situation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think these are really good. I think one of the things that came out in our discussion, the sister and I's discussion, was about the problem with the restraining order. One of the things that came out, which she said, is that although women can file restraining orders on people who stalk them, it has to be served. The person has to be present. Of course, you who filed the report, you can't serve it, but in the case that she narrated, the cases that she narrated was basically, you can't serve a restraining order to a person that doesn't answer the door, you can't fine, things of that nature. So again, he shows you the flip side of social media. Hey man, sometimes your last resort is, make it public. Tell as many people as you can.
Right, and that's why I didn't necessarily mention law enforcement, although, I'm gonna say you should tell them, and maybe there needs to be a greater connection or a sense of unity between law enforcement and the community, right? Because those kind of relationships can become useful. But oftentimes I've seen it to where you got to realize police sometimes are a after the fact kind of organization.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
in quotation marks, highlight.
right. And so you're like, this dude following me around. They're like, well, did he do anything? Is he there now? I don't see him. Okay, well, there's nothing you can do. Well, just because you don't see him, I mean, we've all seen enough horror movies where the blonde girl is inside the house and she's like, oh yeah, I don't see him, it should be cool. And she puts the phone down and turns around and the dude's like,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
it just got real.
Yeah.
So, I would say, tell people, make it public, but also I guess you should strive to reach out to law enforcement and different agencies that they may be able to make available to you. But ultimately, like I said earlier, the powers of the people, your neighbors, watch organizations and things like that is really what's gonna make that happen. Because even if the police were 100% right and exact, and what you called them, they could get there, you still got to take into fact where's the closest police officer at, how long is it gonna take, to get there, and then when he gets there, is that dude gonna be there? How much, how long do you have to live? Versus if you have someone who's your next door neighbor, and you can just scream out the window, or because you guys have a neighborhood watch thing set up, you've got some kind of code, you can flash a light, or whatever the situation is. That dude's gonna be way quicker to get there, or that female is gonna be way quicker to get there to help out.
Yeah, they see the car that you described to them roll
Right,
out, or
right.
they see a person that's suspicious that looks similar to the description you gave them. They'll already be ready. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So when we come back, this is a great discussion. I could see more discussions like this to come. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the specifics of how women and girls can protect themselves when they're out in the general public, in the community, wherever they are. Just some general tips that we as men would like to share, and some of these tips have been shared with us from women. So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about that. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself Radio Show. My name is Teray.
Peace to rule.
Peace, Jock Hill.
And when we closed on the second segment, we were talking a little bit about some of the things women can do, as well as girls, to prevent violence being perpetuated on them, and quite a bit of a discussion in terms of just how we suggest, and others who have talked to us about violence against women, what women and girls should know to prevent acts of violence against them. One of the things that we wanted to share is just some interesting statistics from the World Health Organization. It's called or titled "The Violence Against Women Global Picture Health Response." So one of the things that you'll see if you access this online or through some other source, they give you some really interesting statistics about what they refer to as physical and or sexual violence by a partner or sexual violence by a non-partner. And of course they give you the graphic where they break down the instances of these types of or these forms of violence against women in different parts of the world. But I think what stood out to us the most, which is really interesting, is the health impact that some of these acts have on women. So in the category of mental health, it says that women exposed to intimate partner violence are twice as likely to experience depression. Almost twice of those women are likely to have alcohol use disorders. 16% are more likely to have a low birth weight baby. 1.5 times more likely to acquire HIV, and 1.5 times more likely to contract syphilis infection, chlamydia, or gonorrhea. And it says that 42% of women exposed to intimate partner violence are or have experienced physical or sexual violence at the hands of a partner. About 42% of these women experience either injury or death. So 38% of all murders of women globally were reported as being committed by their intimate partners. So now that we see, and there's a whole bunch of statistics, and again, like we said earlier in the program, these are just reported cases. You know, it's way higher. We can say that without guessing that it's way higher than that. So in saying that, what would be some of the things that just as a collective that we can teach men in reference to how men should treat women? Because it does begin with the education. What are some of the things that we as men need to know about how to treat women? And actually, let's flip it. What is it that women need to know about how they should be treated by men? This is gonna be a hard one for some of the chauvinists out there, man. It's gonna be tough.
Well, it's hard in the world that we live in now, because like we were just building about on the break about the whole gender equality thing. We now live in a world where it's almost looked at as a negative for a man to kind of treat a woman a certain way. Like, you know, I can remember there would be times where I would take women out, and if I opened the door for them or pulled a chair out or say walked on the outside so they wouldn't be, you know, right in the direction of cars in the street, they looked at me like, you know, almost like, you don't think I could protect myself, or you don't think I could do it for myself? And that wasn't the case. That was just how I was always raised, to, you know, to treat women, and just out of respect and caring to be sure that they're good was what I was, you know, really projecting with those actions. It's almost like you have to be sensitive to that, so it's like you can't really go to those lengths anymore. So I just think that it really male and female is really a natural thing. Like this, we've been that way for hundreds of thousands of millions of years, however, you know, far back you want to go. So I think it really should just come natural to us. There's too much thinking, I think, involved in the whole situation. You know what I mean?
No doubt. I was just thinking, if you put little kids together and watch them, you know, the minus the sexual part of that, when you watch them work together, they're helping each other and they're working together to get the job done. And yeah, she will do things that's to be nice to him, and he'll do things to be nice to her. But then he'll also try to go that extra route. When you see some kid being mean to her, he's gonna like push the kid out the way. You know, like, hey, don't be mean. Da, 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 and he'll go at it. And you're right, God. It's a lot easier than what we've made it out to be.
Yeah, it's too much thinking, man.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, it's like you stated earlier. It does go back to nature in terms of, what men are expected to do in terms of their treatment. So, of course, you all know I've stated it many times. I know my brothers are tired of me saying it, but I have to remind, in case you're new to the show, that I work at a high school, and it was stated by another teacher where I work, and I've been seeing it for many, many years, just in the community at large, man, and also among young adults, that there is a commonality in terms of men play fighting with women. Mm-hmm. The contact is, I'm just gonna use that example. The contact is harder than this. It's like serious boom, 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 where a male teenager could be punching on a girl, and this understanding where that's how they play. Mm-hmm. How does everybody see that, man? What could that spark? Is it innocent, or does it lead into something else?
Now, yeah, that's kind of an interesting one. Man, yeah, I'm gonna get in trouble. So earlier in the show when I gave my email address, go ahead and forget that.
Why is that?
Oh man, I'm gonna say that's not a good thing, and here's why. At the end of the day, a man, this is just an average, right? At the end of the day, a man is gonna be stronger than a woman physically, right? That's why there's no female outside linebackers in the NFL. Right? There's just, once you get to a certain level, you're not the same anymore. So I think, I personally would never play with the woman to that degree to where I'm punching her that hard, and that's even within martial arts. I always kind of
scale it back.
Yeah, right, because I realized the way that I hit a dude playing around versus how I hit a female playing around is going to be different. Mm-hmm. Just like the same way when I spar with my son, I can't hit him the same way that I hit the other dude, the grown dudes that I spar with, right? Mm-hmm. Just because he's different, right? Mm-hmm. He's a little bit younger, body's not as developed and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the equality doesn't mean that you do everything that I do.
Equal punishment.
Right. Because it's you definitely talking about the difference between the physique and things of that nature is very important, because I think a lot of times women think, well, you're not doing this because I'm a woman, but it has nothing to do with that per se. It's more about your physique versus my physique. Mm-hmm. I have more muscle mass than you. Right. I hit harder than you. Right. I remember when I was in high school, there was this girl who came out for the team, and I just couldn't hit her. And I thought, for me, it was like, man, this is dangerous, because now I can't play the way that I normally would play.
Right. You hurt yourself now.
Exactly. So, other dudes on my team are like, I'm going to take her head off. And they did, and then she ended up quitting. But for me, it was like, nah, I just, I couldn't do it. So,
but you can't even say wow, that's mean, because, man, I've been on the other, I play football too. I've been on the other end where you see that dude, maybe he makes a nice move, you're like, all right, next time that dude comes to this side of the field, I'm taking that dude's head off. Right? So it's like, that's the game. But so then if you can't compete in that arena, then don't enter it, and just respect the fact that that's not your thing.
Right. And I think that's one of the things where, in the past, sparring with a woman, I was very conscious of the level of contact I would make with her, but I would definitely put the heat on her.
Yeah,
And when
you
I mean
want her to get better.
yeah,
right?
when I mean put the heat on her, it's just like, okay, I'm not gonna when I hit you, because it's not full contact.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hit with the intent of dropping you. You know what I mean? We weren't supposed to be doing that anyway,
Right.
with male or female. But I am gonna give you a sense of what it would be like if
you
someone
actually
really
got
hit you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's something that many of us as men, I think we're responsible for that. Women are responsible for it, but teach girls how to fight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Teach them how to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What age does everyone think, if those of us who have daughters or we have young girls in our family, at what age should we teach girls to fight, to defend themselves physically?
As soon as they can start walking,
Wow. Okay.
right? I mean, you want it to be a natural thing so that you don't go through the whole I'm teaching you this so that you could learn to do this thing,
Mhm.
right? You want it to just be if this happens, this is what you do kind of thing, right? Because then you don't want your daughter to then become like a bully.
Right.
Right, and just start beating up on dudes. Like, yeah, I'm gonna be by you. You're gonna be my boyfriend. No, what? Right? She just, and you're gonna get other phone calls. Right? Your daughter is beating up other dudes at school because none of them want to be her boyfriend.
Right. So now, saying that, how are boys? We were all once boys. How are boys supposed to treat girls, man? I mean, because we know, I'll just take it a step backwards in terms of what my brother said about the media. I mean, boys right now, and girls too, but boys are under this barrage, this mass media barrage, which is creating just this domineering mentality in how they deal with girls or females or women. So what is it that boys need to be taught in reference to like how they better relate to girls? Like, what are some of the things that's just missing, man, just from what everyone has seen or experienced growing up or even now as men?
Well, that shows respect and protect. I think respect is the first thing. I think respect comes with understanding. So understanding that, first and foremost, like you spoke about equality. Equality is not necessarily meaning that we're the same, but you have strengths and weaknesses, and I have strengths and weaknesses. And if we work together, there will be no strengths and weaknesses because we'll balance each other out. So I think teaching that to children as opposed to having them compete for the same role per se, like it's really being taught today. It's like, they're teaching it as there's really no difference in gender, and if you think there's a difference, then something's wrong with you. You know what I mean? So teaching the differences, but not teaching them as one's better than the other.
Right.
You know what I mean? Showing that, okay, there's things you can do that I can, and vice versa.
No, true indeed.
That's what makes us great when we come together.
So just last night, I'm really weird about like certain songs and stuff, and I personally won't listen to them. And then if someone else is listening to it, I may say something. And one of these, Katy Perry, or I think that's her name. Yeah, I kind of made the same face too. I didn't really know.
Sounds familiar, man.
Yeah, I've heard the song before. In any event, my son was like, yeah, he doesn't like those kind of songs. This was a conversation that took place with the whole family, right? My daughter had made some comment about it, was singing or something. And I was like, I don't like these songs because they teach and promote a certain kind of feminism that teaches the women that they don't need men. And then my daughter, so you guys are all with my daughter, right? She says, well, no, girls don't need boys. I can do it all by myself. And I was like, actually, no, you can't. And then, so we use supreme mathematics and alphabet. So I was like, what's the 8th letter in the alphabet? And she was like, H. And I was like, okay, so what's H? And she was like, he or her. And I was like, okay, so now if you look at the 8 and you look at he and her, those are two ciphers, one for he, one for her, but those are connected and they're building with each other. So you do need both him and her. And I was telling her, I was like, look, there's certain things that, she was like, well, you're smart, Dad, you can do everything. And I was like, no, there's certain things that I suck at, that your mom is very good at. So if I didn't have her, I would be, those things that I'm not good at would also affect other things in my life maybe that I am good at. But because your mom balances me out, that's the equality, right? I can now be good or better at those things that I'm good at because she's taking care of my weak spots, and then I'm taking care of her weak spots so that she can be good or better at the things that she's strong at. And like you were saying, so at the end of the day, there's no weaknesses. You just see the strength of two people working together to build. But so I say all that to say that within that, like you were saying though, God, in the TV, she gets all these things, and if not having these kind of conversations with your kid, that's what the God was saying. Turn off the TV or sit down and watch it with your kids, and you be aware enough to have these kind of conversations and to see these things that are being promoted. I definitely think feminism is a great thing. But real feminism, right? Not the whole, you don't need a man and you're independent, you do everything by yourself, because that's not right and exact, right? And I was telling my son the same thing. I was like, yo, when your sister comes time and she's talking about the menstrual cycle and stuff like that, I'm probably not going to have that conversation with her, you know what I'm saying? And really, I don't want to have that conversation. I'm going to send her to her mom, like, yeah, you're probably the best knower. If you want me to take you to go get something, or... I like science and I appreciate anatomy, you know what I mean? If you want to get into that aspect of it, but if you want to actually talk about the thing, you got to deal with your mom, right? But in the same way, with my son, she's come to a point, she's like, okay, you have to talk to him because there's certain things that she can't talk to him. Or, you know what I mean? It's not the same. He needs to have that conversation from a male, right? And so it's like, yeah, you need each other to balance each other out.
Right, and I think one of the things that men tend to forget to teach young boys is just how to deal with girls, and then it turns into you not knowing how to deal with women. Your language, and everybody's guilty, at least in one point of their life, or now, or recently, is guilty. Where you use certain words to express yourself to a woman, and it offends her. And it creates a really ugly situation. So one of the first things which came out here is just teach young boys how to talk to girls in a polite conversation, but also when they have a disagreement with the young lady. Teach girls how to express themselves in the same manner, because much of what's absorbed in the media is promoting that it's okay for girls to be really mouthy, to curse more than men to get their point across, to be more vulgar than men, to create sort of a sense of fear within people who may be, trying to bother them. All that has a place, ladies. I'm not saying that you should never curse out a man, because some men actually, they deserve it, man. That's the only time they're going to take you seriously and leave you alone. Yeah. Especially in what we were talking about today. But teach the boys and girls how to communicate with each other. And also, in a play situation, they do have to be taught about certain boundaries. You know what I mean? Are you supposed to be kicking a boy in between his legs? Are you supposed to be kicking a girl in between her legs?
Should you punch a girl in her chest?
Exactly.
When you play fighting.
When you're playing. I mean, should you be putting her in a chokehold? And I'm telling you, these are the things that we have to put a stop to in high schools and elementary schools and middle school.
Chokehold her and give her a DDT?
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying? That happens. Yeah, true indeed. So, aside from that, I think we should kind of talk about whether or not women, is it okay for daughters to dress like their mothers, especially when they're dressed provocatively. We're kind of revisiting it, but we didn't get into it on this one. But
interesting.
How is that?
Just yesterday, I was at the mall. Which store was I in? Maybe like a Macy's or a Sears or something like that. And we happened to go through the young girl section, or the girl section, and 6 or 7 racks of shorts were all little booty shorts. Like all of them. You couldn't find a pair of shorts that were normal pair of shorts. So when you say, should we let our daughters dress like the mothers?
You don't have no choice.
Man, right? There's almost no choice as far as dress attire. You literally need
Unless
to buy
you
her
look
pants,
right, you have to
and then
really
cut
look.
their pants.
Right. You have to really look, like
Yeah.
search. So like the average person who
Still not
doesn't
gonna
really
do
have
that
that
one.
awareness
Right.
is just gonna buy what's there. Oh, this is cute.
Right.
It's the same thing I have. You know what I
Right.
mean? And it's crazy because a lot of times I'll see older women dressed in a fashion that is more like the youngsters. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they'll be with their daughters. You know what I mean? So it's almost like there needs to be some sort of separation between child, adult, male, female.
Right.
But in this world that we live in, it's becoming more and more
Just
a
one
mixed bag.
thing.
Yeah, one mix. You know what I mean? One thing together. So males dressing more like women. You know, older women dressing like young women. You know, it's becoming crazy. So
Right. I think one of the things that has to be we have to work on a little bit harder is teaching girls what it means to be attractive. That has to be redefined because it's definitely
Right.
been blurred.
Right.
You know, with the media. Go back to what you said. And that could be a show within itself, but we want a sister there. It's been addressed on the show, like what is attractive? You know what I mean? Why is it that the media has hijacked what sex appeal is for girls and women? You know, whereas, and I'm gonna go back to your point, in a whole room of women, you know, am I going to approach the woman with body parts hanging out compared to the woman who's best dressed more business-like? No. You know, because this one to me appears to be a little bit more safe in that respect. She's more professional. She's a little bit more stable. That could be a poor judgment as well. You know what I mean? We all know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
She could be the freakiest one in the whole room.
She could be the one,
More
you know.
likely.
So yeah. So, but in saying that, you know,
Right.
my perception is just like, I'll go roll with this sister right here who could just be the flip side of what I think she is, right? But I think just considering that, yeah, I mean, we definitely have to teach boys what to actually look for in women. You know what I mean? It's now just her ass, her physique.
Right.
You know what I mean? What she can do to me sexually, or what I fantasize I want her to do to me sexually.
Right.
And then you still have this thing to where if you have a daughter, it's like these are the types of males that you're gonna have to watch out for.
Negotiate through.
Right. And I mean, you know, yeah.
because you think about it, we all go through it whether we're taught it or not. We all learn that, you know, initially we'll go after the most, you know, the girls with the biggest behind,
Provocatively
biggest
dressed.
breasts, you know, that are most attractive to us physically. But we realize over time, like, man, what a
Why
waste.
am I with
You
these?
know what I mean?
Because it could get really boring.
Right.
It could get really boring.
And then you start to learn that, okay, that's not what really I need to be complete in my situation. So then you know what I mean? You go to what's needed, but a lot of times people never make it out because they'll, you know, get in too deep. They may have some children with that woman, and then, you know, their life's all kind of crazy. So
Right.
I think if fathers were more upfront with their sons as far as this is what you're going to come across, you know, young boys are gonna be knuckleheads and do a lot of the things that they have to kind of learn on their own anyways. But if they have a blueprint that you put in place for them, they'll have something to compare to now.
Right.
They'll have a sheet to look at, like, okay, well, this is what Pop said. Should I take a chance? You know what I mean? They may take the chance, they may not, but at least they have that sheet to look at, like, okay, well, you know, Pop tends to be right most of the time. You know, he has gone through this before, so maybe I'll fall back. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Deep. So I think aside from that, why don't we go ahead and take a brief break, and when we come back, we'll tell you what to review and do. Peace.
Peace.
So the first mistake was just not having your keys in your hand. You should always walk to your car with the keys in your hand when you walk out of a building. More importantly, if you notice I wasn't looking around, always be aware when you walk into a parking lot. Peace. Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself Radio Show. My name is Teray.
peace, Jeru.
Peace. Jaquel Knowledge of Law.
And here we are, the last segment of the show, and what we wanted to talk briefly with you about is the idea of women's shelters that are available to all of you who, quite frankly, may need to find solace somewhere. There are a lot of agencies and social services that are available to women who may be in an abusive relationship, whether it be domestically or otherwise. Stalking, any type of harassment that may be deemed as, unlawful and or unsafe. So there's an interesting website through the Department of Public Social Services. It's dpss.lacounty.gov, which is the website. And they give you a long list of services where women could actually go and not only get counseling, but if needed, they could be referred to battered shelters. I've met at least 2 women in my life who have talked about, the experience of going into those shelters. They're highly confidential, and it's just like, to give you an analogy, it's similar to a witness protection program, to where you go to a place which is not registered as a battered shelter, so those things are kept confidential from the public, and more importantly, the confidentiality by law. People that get involved in any types of cases where women need to be protected, by law, they're not allowed to reveal any type of information. And you also need to be mindful of the fact that there are battered shelters which, admit children as well with their mothers, so they don't attempt to separate the family. But just in the LA area, you have Central and West Los Angeles, San Gabriel Valley and East Los Angeles, Antelope Valley, Palmdale and Santa Clarita, South Central Los Angeles. So since we rally there, one place that you could contact is the Family Crisis Center, South Central. Their number is 323-737-3900. And you could also just get on this website or contact a Department of Social Services where you are to find out these types of places. One of the things I wanted one of my brothers to go into before we left, what are some of the things that women should do to safeguard themselves, just walking out and about in the general public, going to the gym, going to work, going home, going to the mall? What would be some basic tips that we could leave our viewers with in terms of that?
Just pay attention to your surroundings first and foremost. Don't be on your cell phone when you're walking in a dark alley. Common sense stuff, but I think a lot of times we just overlook it because we get so used to or comfortable with our common way of life. But just always be aware, be alert, because there's people who prey on people who aren't paying attention. You know what I mean? You think about the criminal, he's successful because the prey that he preys on is not paying attention. Or even in the animal kingdom, the antelope that's alert generally gets away, but the one that's not paying attention, that fraction of a second, the lion catches up or the predator catches up. So the same applies in our way of life too. So that's what I say.
Indeed. Yeah, no, those are great points. Definitely, pay attention to your surroundings. Look at people. When they pass by you, and acknowledge that you see them. Right. Oftentimes, that's reported in a lot of stories is the person passed by the person who later assaulted them or not. They just didn't pay they didn't pay any attention to that person. So, look people in the eye. And they go a long way, because you're just being nice to people at the same time. So.
True indeed. I think one of the things that was told to me by the sister I talked to earlier today about stalking, when you move in the streets, move with a sense of confidence. Anything that you consider inappropriate that may be directed toward you by a male, check them on a certain level. Of course, you don't want to get too crazy with people, because of course there are men that are very violent out there. Your surroundings, being aware of your surroundings. One of the things that she said is when you're out jogging, if you have to jog by yourself in the evening hours, she suggested that women, jog in the street as opposed to on the sidewalk, walk in the street in certain neighborhoods. If you have to walk in the street, because if anything happens, people are more likely to see you in the middle of the street than on the sidewalk. When you go to a gym, people go different hours in the evening, early morning when it's dark. Park as close to the entrance as you can,
or a light, or under a light, right?
Or a light. It's always a really good safeguard before you even exit any place, a club, your job. Have your keys in your hand, and you can walk to the car, and you won't be fiddling around in your purse. I would suggest women in general just they have a flashlight attached to their keys, a really good hand light, so you won't be in the dark.
Yeah, you can buy one of those little powerful LED lights. Like
even your
$2
phone.
or
Your
something.
phone has a flashlight a lot of times. You're probably on it texting anyways. Just cut the light on and use it.
Right.
Another thing would be look in your back seat of your car, or look at your car when you approach it.
Look under your car.
Yeah.
Right.
If something looks strange, then more than likely it is strange.
Women in the household, there are a lot of different cases where people barge into people's houses. Home robberies are really, common these days. Anytime someone comes to your door, make it a habit, look out the peephole. If you can prevent looking out of the window, because you want to make sure a person that's a stranger, they're not aware that you're looking at them.
Right.
You know what I mean? If it's someone that's not supposed to be at your door, you can call the proper authorities. And this is one of those things I want to point out. I'm glad we went across this. A good friend of mine, which she's like my mother figure, where I work, she passed out this. She emailed this bulletin that the police department released about a sad gang in Los Angeles County that was luring women and young girls into situations where they wound up being raped. So you have some people who are using women as like decoys, and these women are running up to other women and saying, "Hey, I need some help." And then, of course, it's a woman, so you naturally feel like, well, there's nothing that could be wrong. Next thing you know, this woman is lured into a situation where a bunch of men are waiting for her.
Wow.
They even sent out a bulletin about how you should avoid accepting things that people are passing out to you, because there have been some cases where people have laced those flyers and or notices, or how people are real quick to give you things when you're out and about, where they're giving you these types of poisons, things of that nature that could be absorbed into the skin. They put them on cars. There's just a lot of things out there that are lurking that you got to be aware of. But more importantly, be aware of the shadows around you. You know what I mean? If you can prevent walking past the alley, if you can prevent walking to certain places you're not familiar with by yourself, avoid it. And last thing I'm going to say is, when you want to meet new people, women, ladies, girls, it's always good to meet people that someone else knows. You know what I mean? In a party situation, it's kind of challenging, but it's always good to figure out if that person that you may be interested in, if he knows someone else in that room. that you know or a friend of yours knows, because the more
References.
references,
It's
thank
like
you.
a job, right?
Right.
You know, a lot of times people won't get hired unless they know someone else
Right.
at that place. So
True indeed.
there's a method to that, to that madness, right?
The old LA rule, which I learned from women coming up, when a man asks you for your phone number, you can politely say, no, give me your phone number. If you're interested in calling him, hey man, you got these $200 phones. You could put a block on your number and call him until you get to know him. If you got to do that for a year, do it. You know what I mean? If you're unsure, if you have a gut feeling, more than likely you're right.
Right.
You know.
Indeed.
Anything
I'd
else?
say
people?
I like this one. When you're walking in areas, try to walk close to the wall so that you can use that as some kind of protection measure. You know what I mean? You don't want to be out away from it so that someone can, or a group of people can surround you, right? So that way if you have the wall at your back, at least you know no one is going to get behind you, right? You know what I mean? As far as like worst case scenario type thing.
Very good. And also, if any situation that you enter in where you have the opportunity, the potential to run. Doesn't matter how trained you are, that's always the best weapon. Just run away from a situation as quickly as possible.
And don't just run in a straight line, because more than likely a man's going to be a little faster than you in most cases, not all cases. So, try to obviously use obstacles, climb, jump over stuff, go, in stores, whatever the case may be, but make it as difficult for that person, because more than likely they'll give up. You know what I mean? Because they'll just be like, man, it's just too much. You know what I mean?
Buy a whistle. That's another good thing. Buy a whistle, ladies. Why don't we get into the read, view, and do? I like to give the read over to the God Jakil.
Word. So for the read, we've got the the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and so that's a good book to show you or give you an understanding of some good principles and postures and positions and attack lines which you could use to help better defend yourself.
And I would encourage viewers to check out the Megan's Law website, which informs you about sex offenders in your area. And I'm going to tell you, man, I looked at this website years ago when I lived in the city of Long Beach, and I encourage everybody to look at that website, because you're going to see how many sex offenders, child predators are living just in your general area, because they have to register themselves upon release.
You never know who you may personally know who may be on that list,
Right.
who wasn't talking about it. I worked with a dude, so at this IT company, we did DSO actually, and someone had a great idea to go to Megan's list. For people who are into computers, you know what it is, dude. You're sitting at work, there's nothing else to do but be on the internet. So you're on the internet. Because you're on the internet all day long, 5 days a week, right? You find other stuff that most people don't see on the internet. So in any event, this dude went to Megan's Law and started putting random people's names in, because he thought it'd be funny to look them up. And one person's name did come back.
Wow.
And that circulated through the whole office, and there was a big uproar about that thing. Yeah, so like the guy was saying, not only to see the people who live in your area, but you never know who may be on that list and who may not be on that list. So it's good to pay attention to.
That's
I
really
think
great.
there's another one called
Are they okay?
Crime Dog or Watchdog or something like that. That does the same thing. It basically shows all the dots of the offenders in your area, like on a map or whatever.
Great. And the do?
The do is to take a self-defense class with a reputable teacher
That
and earn your certification. A black belt in the United States doesn't necessarily denote you are trained. Buy pepper spray, get training and practice. So I think the training and practice for women, you should learn about a lot of the pressure points and sensitive spots on men, women, whoever you're dealing with, whether it be the eyes and other different areas.
Right, exactly.
And if you, like the brothers were telling you, and we plan on doing a little, just stay tuned.
So I'd like to thank my brothers. As always, it's a pleasure doing the show. Thank you all for tuning in. And we'll give the brother Jaquil the last word.
Now it's a Self Radio. You don't have to go to college to do knowledge. Peace.
Peace. So what you saw in that clip there was a classic mistake of someone not paying attention not only to the surroundings, right, but they were just stuck looking at the cell phone. So they weren't able to see the attack coming up prior to it happening. Now, once you were grabbed, you have to realize what's happening. The person is trying to expand you, so automatically you want to contract yourself. That was the pulling back of the grabbed hand, which was the left hand. And then once you contract with the left hand, you want to make your attack with your other hand, which was the palm strike, which is placed with this part of the palm to the nose. And then you want to make your escape to get to safety. Peace. So what you saw in that clip there was a classic mistake of someone not paying attention not only to the surroundings, right, but they were just stuck looking at the cell phone. So they weren't able to see the attack coming up prior to it happening. Now, once you were grabbed, you have to realize what's happening. The person is trying to expand you, so automatically you want to contract yourself. That was the pulling back of the grabbed hand, which was the left hand. And then once you contract with the left hand, you want to make your attack with your other hand, which was the palm strike, which is placed with this part of the palm to the nose. And then you want to make your escape to get to safety.